Okay, the meeting's being recorded. Okay, thanks for joining me today. This is the first session, one of 9, in what we've called the Colour Academy. And today we're going to talk about colour communication. It's a very high level conversation. It's a course which I've developed today from talking to the service managers in our organisation. But a little bit about the Colour Academy concept. Meeting the PCT community, it became clear that we had some real experts working with us, but we also had some people who don't have a graphic arts background and not really an appreciation of colour. And so the idea was that we were stepping in too quickly with teaching people about profiling and colour management when they really needed to have some sort of deeper understanding of some of the drivers and an underlying sort of a theory, if you like. So today, as I said, we've got a full agenda, but for people who might want to step in with more technical questions, I think those questions will be answered as the as these sessions go forward over August. So this is a very, very high level overview, but I think it's the most important thing. And if you like what you see today, I do think at least this presentation should be given and understood by most people in Zycon customer facing to understand colour. Okay, colour management, why? Well, for me, there's only ever been 2 reasons to have colour management. One is to deliver the expected, so have predictable colour. This means you can set a contract with a customer and fulfill that contract. No surprises on either end. And the second is repeatable colour, to make the same thing day in, day out, week in, week out. And that is for business retention. And those are the only 2 reasons for having colour management. It's process control. And I think we forget sometimes that print is a manufacturing process, and one of the main components of that process is colour. So for me, this is the job of a colour management system. The challenge our customers face daily is that they're presented with a digital mess. A file which contains both Pantones, brand colours, or it can be a pre-printed. Oops, don't know what's going on here. Pre-printed work. It contains picture elements or 4-colour elements which have been processed maybe on a different kind of printing system in the past. And they have the challenge of somehow reconstructing this job and making their customers happy. And the job of colour management is to help them get from A to B in the quickest possible manner. So, in a commercial sense, this is the most important slide. If this has any resonance to your customers, then we have chance and an open opportunity to speak about colour management. We have the customer or the brand owner asking the printer to reproduce their digital mess. And what happens usually, or can happen, is that we get a trial and error process happening. And obviously the more trial and error goes on, we have a decrease in profits. No surprise there. And as far as our press guy is concerned, our Zycon operator, well, you know, he doesn't know any different. It is the world he has been taught, and he expects this is the way of working. Something else about this scenario is the salesman tends to get deeply involved. And so there's not just decreased in profits due to the press being used as a very expensive copy of Photoshop, but also time and effort elsewhere in the factory and personnel are also being wasted. The salesman sat on the production guy's shoulder, often making adjustments or suggesting adjustments, and ultimately maybe what they deliver is compromised. It's not as good as it could be, and it might be very difficult to reproduce. Very often in these scenarios, what we find is that the print owner accepts that this is the way of the world, and accepts it maybe on the first time for that order. But if this process has to happen again for the next order, then we see more and more profits being lost. To extensiate this concept a little bit further, if the brand owner or customer wants their work produced in different ways, maybe a magazine, a label, a poster, then at different printers or throughout one print shop, again we can see without colour management or a strategy to help, they're going to be lost. So how do we move forward and change the status quo? Well, we have to start communicating colour in a different way. Today we communicate colour in terms of CMYK. Printers understand this, and it's something which has been traditional for many, many years. We describe something in terms of 100% magenta, 100% yellow, but we know if we print that on different stocks, we get two different colours. So the way we need to, so this illustrates one thing. Communicating colour in terms of CMYK doesn't really help us achieve a desired colour that we actually want to see. So we need a different methodology, and there is one. So for in the whole of human history, we've used different models to describe abstract concepts such as length. We can use a meter. We don't have to supply somebody with a meter for them to understand what a meter is. Weight and time. And we have now a way of communicating what a colour looks like by communicating it in LAB. Now for this presentation, I certainly don't want to get deep into what LAB is, and as far as customer facing for the first time, it's just a way of defining a measurement, a visual response. The point is, if you can define a colour, you can ask for that to be reproduced and remove the ambiguity around the CMYK problem. So, for example, Colour by numbers means that just like if we want to order a metre of wood from 3 different factories, we'd expect a metre back. We wouldn't expect to have to give them a sample. And we'd also expect they would come back within a certain tolerance. Likewise, we can request an LAB value rather than a CMYK and expect within a tolerance that different printing processes will produce something that looks very similar. And that tolerance is something we measure in delta E, something I'm sure you've heard about. And I'm just going to put one slide in here today because we're going to look at this in a much more in-depth way later on. But just as we have with our meter, we have a plus or minus tolerance in what we might expect back. Well, if this is the colour that we want, we allow a certain tolerance, which anything falling within inside this tolerance is considered okay. There's no right or wrong what the tolerance should be. It's a discussion a printer needs to have with his customer. Anyway, moving on. So, colour by numbers. So how do we help our customers untangle their digital mess? Well, the first place we help them untangle their digital mess is around spot colours. Now, those can be both Pantones, they can be brand colours. More and more, we're seeing brand owners not communicating their brand colour as a Pantone, but as an LAB value. Coca-Cola, Heineken Green are being described by those owners as a LAB. We also have a very common scenario is that we have customers who are faced with a pre-printed sample, and regardless of what the separations are in the file, the customer is asked to simply match the sample, the visual sample. And we have a strategy for helping our customers do this. So the first thing is we have to describe something in LAB. So we have all the Pantone library described in LAB. If a customer is to supply us an LAB value, we can add that value to our library. And if we're now presented with a pre-printed sample, we can simply take a measurement of the pre-printed sample without having to guess or mess around. But as I state here in big red letters, we don't print LAB. So how do we achieve this, and how do we do it quickly? Well, in the Zycon Colour Control, we have a database sat in the cloud, and in that database we hold all the Pantone library. We also have a very small database which we can have both custom colours and colours which customers define, such as Heineken Green. So if somebody walks into the factory with a pre-printed sample, just by taking a reading of the job, we'll give you the correct LAB, and we'll hold that in our database. But again, you're asking, how does this? We don't print out LAB. So we first, how do we translate this now onto our paper to make an actual print? Well, we take a profile of our Zycon, and that data is explaining the colour possibility of that print engine. And that's stored up in the cloud, And when we request a profile to be created, we have a profile which is ready to go onto the X800. And also we have a table containing the correct recipes for both Pantone and brand colours. So it's a 5-10 minute exercise to get the best possible brand colour, spot colour, or a job which is walking in off the street without any guesswork. And what the cloud does is it figures out the correct recipe depending on the material and the number of colours in the machine. And the point being, the big point being, is that the operator is doing no tweaks. He's just keeping his press in good shape, making sure his densities are correct, making sure he's kept his linearization on. But he's not having to do any tweaks or pre-press work. It's been done for him. So we now have a strategy for looking after spot colours in our digital mess, in all different flavours. But how do we control the whole printing process? Well, if you can buy into this idea of communicating a single colour, a single desire in a LAB, then maybe you can conceptually jump to the idea that we could describe a few colours. In fact, we can describe every single pixel. And this is what we call a reference profile. A reference profile describes the colour we would like to see on our press based on a printing process. So that could be offset, it could be a customer's machine in-house, it could be anything. And we have two types of possibilities with what we would call a emulation or a source profile, and that is we can tailor make one, and we can tailor make one and use that within our X800, or we can use an industry standard. On the screen is Fogra 39, and I do realise that the guys from the States will be listening to this, and that would be the equivalent of Grackle. But it's a choice. It's a defined choice. And to make it happen, we simply set up a colour workflow within inside the X800 using the defined profile. So workflow 1 would be Fogra. Workflow 2 in this instance is emulating a Indigo output. But now, because we're not guessing how the colour is going to be reproduced, we have a stable colour output. So we're not relying on separations, we're relying on colour. And this means that we can have not only choice, our customers can offer choice to their customers. They can then make sure that the first print looks like the second print because they have a reference place to always move back to. There's never any guesswork involved. And again, back to this. The press guy just works within his natural, normal parameters. So this is how we get to a point of predictability. We know that our press is going to print to Fogra, for example. We know what our press is going to print the best possible brand or spot colours, and that can be communicated back to their client with the stipulation there is no guesswork involved. Sometimes it's going to be good in terms of spot colours, sometimes it's maybe going to be a little bit disappointing, but it's going to be as good as it's going to ever be. So the next question is, how do we maintain the colour? How do we offer stability? Well, we have two strategies which we employ to do this. One is that we stabilise the output through what we call smart separations. And the next is that we employ a quality control routine, which is taking the temperature or taking the colour of the values and watching the drift of the machine to make sure that nothing is printed which is out of specs. So if we just move out of I'd like to just share with you this idea of stabilised separations. On the left hand side of the screen we have these separations as they would come into the RIP. But the separations are rewritten on the output due to the profile. And as we know, very small changes in colour, so we're only going about 5%. Have huge impacts on colour. So if we have a press which is drifting, and I'm hoping that you'll see this before, after, it's going blue. And we should see this on the colour image as well, changing. However, when you look to the right hand side, and the changes are happening on the entire picture, we're not seeing those drifts. And that's because of smart separations. And if we take a look at that, you see CMYK. And just to illustrate this again for you, if we take black away in our smart separations, you see black is being used to a maximum, and that stops colour drifts being visual even if the press is moving. So it's not just protecting our grey balance, it's protecting all our colours. So this means that we give ourselves now a more of a fighting chance with the technologies we have. So with that in mind, so smart separations to reduce drifts, we then employ a quality control routine. And conceptually, I think a lot of people find this very difficult to understand. And I think it's because quality control is something quite new to digital printing. So the idea goes something like this. In the cloud, we replicate the conditions of the X800. And by doing so, we calculate what the printer should be printing. We then, in the real world, print a control strip and read that control strip in the real world. We then compare by uploading to the cloud the real world measurements versus our predicted measurements. And from that information, we can see if our machine is in good specs. Also, there is a comprehensive report, which is certainly not for this presentation today, which will steer a customer into knowing whether or not he needs to do something regarding changing the machine. So in this way, we have a way of taking a good sample of the press condition, knowing if it's going to reproduce as we expect it should do, and then go ahead to print. And this is lean manufacturing quality control, which you would find this kind of methodology. Test before you produce is simply the mantra on any manufacturing process. So when we employ colour management, we can start to have different conversations with the end user, or our customers can, at least. So when it comes down to brand colours and spot colours, the salesman can have a different conversation. He can say, do you have lab values? Or do you want Pantones? These are our Pantones, and this is how good we can produce them. Or if you have a sample, we have a facility in the factory where we can simply take the readings, and it'll be as near as possible. And we can tell you how near it is in terms of delta E. If you like, as long as you like what you see, with the system we employ, the first proof will equal the first production, will equal the second, third and fourth order. And in terms of production time, there's very, very little what the press guy has to do now. In terms of CMYK, or a press look and feel, we're moving away from having an uncontrolled methodology. So we are now emulating a process, and we can all, as the machine drifts away from that process, it's easy to bring it into line. So now we have a different story as well. Our salesman can say to his customer, we print to an industry standard. Does that suit you? And now, and the other thing to think about is every job has been put together at some point via Photoshop and InDesign, and all those tools are using industry standards. So it's a very good bet that even if you've got a sample, you have no idea how it was made, it's going to be made to look and feel probably like Graco or Fogra. It's a damn good guess, because those standards are based on standard printing inks. So as you move away from Zycon colour to a industry standard type colour model, you have more of a chance to please the customer straight away. You have a stronger story, and you also have the story of repeatability. But you also have choice if you want. You can reproduce on your Zycon different looks and feels for your customers if you require. Again, it's just a choice of production now. There's no messing around or tweaking. As long as he keeps his quality control regime under control, we'll be able to produce repeatability. Also, in the future, as Colour Key comes into our portfolio, we'll also we will also be able to use the reports to demonstrate that we did what we said we were going to do. And today we have a similar report we can pull out of Zycon Colour Control to illustrate that the job was QC'd before it was printed. So let's, in summary, what we have if we put these tools in place. We change the relationship with the brand owner, with the printer. The brand owner gets his expectations set early. There's no false promises. So if it's a specific Pantone which he cannot produce, there's no factory downtime in trying to mess around creating that Pantone on the digital press. The first recipe coming from the cloud will be the best recipe. And this just needs to be communicated. So the customer knows what he's going to get before he engages into placing the order. Sales have a stronger story, and also there's none of their time being wasted being in the factory trying to fine-tune something. So their working life is being optimised and doing what they should be doing. Production becomes rules-based, and in some of the future lessons we're going to do, we're going to look at the strategies, how we take different kinds of jobs and go from A to B in the quickest possible manner. So all those questions around what do we do when somebody walks in with a sample, we'll illustrate in real time in the future how to do that without messing around. And the print business in general has more control over their bottom line. There's no mysterious colour has been demystified. You produce to a set of specs, and as long as you keep your quality control regime under control, you're not printing for the trash. Also, you can prove that you printed to your specs, and so you remove forever-ending discussions around sort of nuances around colour. Okay, so that concludes this very high-level introduction. I'm going to ask if you want to ask any questions. We'll ask them now.